left foot. Never touched his right foot, his left foot. But what a player.
Gloves on his feet.
He's a huge legend of Hungarian football.
He was active in, in the harshest communist area. Especially for the genius in culture and in sport, it was extremely difficult.
We Hungarians consider him to be the greatest footballer of the 20th century.
Ferenc Puskás died at the age of 79 in 2006. Hungary mourned the loss of a national hero. His funeral brought the country to a standstill. A true sign of the affection Orci, or Little Brother as he was known back home, was held in the hearts of his compatriots.
Emotionally, everybody was touched. It's obvious that Puskás was considered here in Hungary as the #1 son of the nation. He was the most widely known person as Hungarian in the world. So in New Zealand or Mexico or Scotland, you have said the name Puskás. The story is always the same. I was asked, where are you from? I'm from Hungary. What is Hungary? You know, that's Budapest. Oh, that's Puskás. Yes, that's the home of Puskás.
Puskás was actually born Ferenc Puskás Bíró here in the Budapest suburb of Kispest in 1927. His father, Ferenc Sr., changed the family name to Puskás when his son was 10. Young Ferenc joined the local team, Kispest AC, where his father was a coach, and initially played under the pseudonym Miklos Kovács in order to bypass the minimum age rule of 12.
He was a one-off. Even as a child, he could do anything he wanted with the ball. And over the first 10 metres, he was ahead of everybody.
And it was with Kispest where Puskás shot to prominence. He made his debut for them in 1943. And the following year, the club was renamed Honved after a takeover by the Ministry of Defence. That made it the club of the Hungarian Army, in which Puskás held the rank of Major, hence his nickname, the Galloping Major. He helped establish Honved as the country's leading side. And in 1948, he was Europe's top scorer with 50 goals. Such talent convinced Hungary's communist government to use Puskás as a political tool.
Even the harshest communist regime needed legitimacy. It was necessary to testify that this communist dictatorship is equal or even better than the so-called imperialistic Western, capitalism. And Puskás was a good, raw material for the communist regime to say, yeah? The communist regime is able to provide chances and possibilities for that kind of genius.
Gustav Sebeś was appointed coach of the Hungarian national team in 1949 and encouraged the side to play what he called socialist football, with every player working hard for the others. Under him, a Puskás-inspired Hungary became Olympic football champions in Helsinki in 1952. Jula Grosic was goalkeeper in that side, which beat Yugoslavia 2-0 in the final.
I would say that with Orci as captain, with his know-how and ability, we formed a team that was the best in the world at that time. No doubt about that. Orci, both as captain and the most talented player, was inspirational. And he played a decisive part in the way the team used to perform to such a high level.
Hungary may have been the Olympic champions, but the sceptics poured scorn on their success. Puskás and co were determined to prove them wrong when they faced England in a friendly at Wembley the following year.
The press of the West countries said that it's not a real success because the big professional players didn't play at the Olympic Games. That's why the game against England was very, very important.
The game shook the rest of the world. The visitors produced a breathtaking display to beat the English 6-3. Two goals from Nandor Hideg-Kute gave Hungary a 2-1 lead. Then Puskás produced a moment of genius that's still fondly remembered today.
Zoltán Csibor broke free down the right wing and passed to Puskás. When he received the ball, Billy Wright tried to tackle him, and Ochi produced a back heel that sent Wright sliding past him. The near post was there, unguarded for Ochi to score. Very few players would have been able to execute such a move or even dare to attempt scoring a goal like that.
With less than half an hour gone, Puskás put Hungary 4-1 up. And yet more craft from his left foot almost set up a fifth. Eventually, Josef Božič made sure with a spectacular effort from distance. It was England's first defeat at Wembley by non-British opposition. Nandor Hideg-Kute may have scored a hat-trick, but for most observers, Puskás was the star.
We were stunned because we saw a style of play, a system of playing that we'd never seen before. And none of these players meant anything to us. We didn't know about Puskás, we did afterwards. And all these fantastic players, they were men from Mars as far as we were concerned. And, you know, coming to England, England's never been beaten at Wembley. This is a 2-0, 3-0, 4-0, maybe 5-1 demolition of a small country who are just coming into European football. The captain, Ferenc Puskás, they call him the Galloping Major. He was in the army, so how can this guy serving for the Hungarian army come to Wembley and rifle us to defeat?
That performance, plus the 7-1 thrashing of England in the return fixture 6 months later, and a 27-match unbeaten run since May 1950, meant the Hungarians, with Puskás as captain, went to the 1954 World Cup in Switzerland as favourites. 2 goals from Puskás in a 9-0 victory over North Korea, and one in this 8-3 thrashing of West Germany, helped them top their first-round group. But the latter result was marred by German defender Werner Liebrich after Puskás spoke to Liebrich's Hungarian-speaking teammate Josef Posipal.
Puskás asked him to interpret for him and to tell Liebrich that he intended to torment him throughout the game. This was more or less the message. He said he'd roll the ball through his legs whenever he wanted, and it'd make him look silly. Posipal asked Puskás not to do that, and so Liebrich took his revenge out on Puskás.
In the second half, a foul by Liebrich saw Puskás suffer a serious ankle injury, which threatened his participation in the rest of the tournament.
He was a key player and, in fact, the main reason behind those world-class results that we'd achieved. And he was forced out for the next 2 matches.
But for Hungary, normal service was resumed even without their inspirational captain. In the quarter-finals, they met Brazil, who'd finished runners-up on home soil 4 years previously. A 4-2 win sent Hungary through to the semi-finals, and their unbeaten record was now 30 games. A week had passed since the injury to Puskás, but he still showed no signs of improvement as he limped around the training ground. There was no way he'd be ready for the semi-finals against Uruguay. That finished 2-2 after 90 minutes and the game went into extra time. Although Hungary eventually won 4-2, they didn't have the best of preparations for the final against West Germany.
Those 2 15-minute periods of extra time and a little party after the game made us late for our train. We also spent time looking for a restaurant so we could eat something. And as a result, we arrived back at our hotel between 3 and 4 o'clock on the Friday morning.
Lack of rest was not the only problem plaguing the Hungarian team before the final in the Swiss capital Bern. Feelings were running high as to whether Puskás should play.
Apparently, at the last meal in the hotel just before the match, a huge argument had broken out. That was because there were players who preferred Puskás didn't play. Though it wasn't that they didn't want him to play. They just believed there'd be a 10-man team, because they were worried that Ochi wasn't fit enough, and that all he wanted to do was to lift the trophy.
Puskás did return as captain for the final, but his presence on the pitch was down solely to his reputation, as he was far from fully fit. Germany had fielded an understrength side in their first-round group encounter, so a repeat of the 8-3 scoreline was highly improbable. Puskás may not have been fit, but he justified his selection by scoring the opening goal after just 6 minutes. And 3 minutes later, a misunderstanding between German defender Werner Kohlmeier and his goalkeeper Tony Turek handed Zoltán Czibor a gift for Hungary's second. Those who expected another rout were made to think again though. The Germans hit back immediately, Max Morlock reducing the deficit just 2 minutes later. Two from Helmut Rahn put the Germans in front with just 6 minutes left. But Puskás thought he'd put Hungary back on level terms with just 2 minutes remaining, only for the linesman to flag him offside. The game was dubbed the Miracle of Bern, as West Germany became world champions for the first time. But Hungary's first defeat in 31 games had dramatic repercussions back home.
Hungarian football was supported extremely in Hungary by the communist leaders. But after this match, I think the football was not the favorite thing of the leaders.
After the match, thousands of people went onto the streets of Budapest and all over the country to demonstrate. Firstly because of the defeat, and then soon afterwards to protest against the government at the time.
After World War II, increased Soviet influence in Hungary led to the revolution of 1956, which saw thousands flee abroad, including Puskás and several of his Honved teammates, who were in Spain at the time for a European Cup tie. Initial reports suggested Puskás had died, but he turned up alive and well in Austria, and then crossed the border into Italy.
He stayed in Milan for quite a while in order to become registered as a player, but the federation didn't give him permission to stay. I don't know if it was for political reasons. I don't think anyone knew. So after a while, when it was obvious the problem wasn't about to go away, he left for Spain.
Specifically the Spanish capital Madrid. He was 31 at the time, but Real Madrid were keen to offer him a contract. Looking back, it was a wise decision, but one which had his teammates, who called him Pancho, raising their eyebrows at first.
He'd spent 2 years without playing competitively, apart from when they played amongst themselves. So Pancho became fat. Pancho, when he arrived, was overweight, so we called him Fatty. But he knew how to adapt to circumstances, and he played in a position that he wasn't used to, as a striker instead of a central midfielder.
At first he was chubby, then he became a phenomenon. Firstly as a footballer, and secondly as a person. Extraordinary. He was a key player for our team because he was someone who could shoot from a long way out, 30 to 35 metres from goal, and score.
Puskás soon shed the extra pounds and formed an instant understanding with Di Stefano. The Hungarian took Spain by storm. He began with a hat-trick on his debut and helped Real Madrid to 5 successive league titles, and finished as Spain's leading scorer on 4 occasions during his 8 seasons there.
He was so quick over the first 5 to 10 metres. Besides, he was very intelligent. He looked up, had a great touch. He wore gloves on both feet.
But the highlight of his career in the Spanish capital was the 1960 European Cup final against Eintracht Frankfurt in Glasgow. Real had won the trophy every year since the competition's inception in 1955. Their West German opponents had destroyed Rangers of Scotland 12-4 on aggregate in their semi-final. Madrid were determined to make it 5 in a row, and their superiority soon became apparent. Puskás's fabled left foot helped the Spaniards take a 3-1 half-time lead. The second half belonged to one man, Ferenc Puskás. He scored a further 3 goals in 15 minutes to make the score 6-1. Even today, he's still the only man to have scored 4 times in a European Cup final. That performance just served to underline his standing as one of the world's greatest goal scorers. They were part of the 200+ he scored for the record Spanish champions in all competitions over 8 years. Di Stefano also helped himself to a hat-trick as Real went on to complete a 7-3 triumph.
In the Glasgow final, he scored 4. I scored 3. He beat me by 1. He was outstanding.
You can't compare his game with Alfredo's, simply because Alfredo roamed all over the field and Pancho was the man who finished off in the last 25 metres and the opposition penalty area. When Pancho received the ball, it was almost certainly a goal.
Puskás played in 2 more European Cup finals for Madrid, against Benfica 2 years later and Inter Milan in 1964, losing on both occasions. He did pick up winners' medals in 1959 and 66, though he didn't play in either final. When Real lost to Benfica in that final in 62, Puskás scored all of their goals in a 5-3 defeat. But Eusebio scored twice to help the Portuguese club retain the trophy. Although Puskás's second hat-trick in a European Cup final helped establish him as one of the all-time greats, his quest for World Cup glory that same year also ended in failure. He'd taken out Spanish citizenship in order to represent his adopted nation at that year's tournament in Chile. But Spain were knocked out in the first round. Win or lose, though, he never changed as a person.
We used to have a chuckle, because he'd often put his hand in his pocket and hand out money. He even handed out clothes. Sometimes he'd take off what he was wearing and give it to a Hungarian beggar, who he'd then embrace, have a glass of wine with, and then cry because it was very emotional for the Hungarians to meet one another, embrace and have a drink.
Puskás remains a Real Madrid legend even today, but despite his goal-scoring exploits around half a century ago, his compatriots living at home under communist rule had no idea of his achievements at that time.
He was absolutely isolated. So there was even not a single news in Hungary about how the Real Madrid is successful, how they were able to win the highest cups of the European Championship. So, he was absolutely isolated. So the communist regime was able technically and physically to block and isolate even the biggest Hungarian serving outside in Real Madrid. So we were absolutely no information about it.
How times have changed. Today, Puskás is regarded as a hero, and his legacy is very much in evidence back home. The National Stadium, formerly the Nib Stadion, was renamed the Puskás Ferenc Stadion in 2001. Ironically, the man himself helped plant the foundations back in the 1950s.
He was one of the workers who built the stadium in the 50s because it was a marketing action by the communist government to invite the famous athletes and football players to build a stadium. Of course, it was 1 or 2 hours and no more, but it was a symbolic thing.
The Puskás name also lives on at one of the country's leading football academies, which is named after him. Its founder hopes that the Puskás legend will inspire today's generation and those to come.
we would like to build a brighter future for the Hungarian football, and we need great players from the past who can testify. Fabulous example for the young generation. Puskás is definitely the number one.
You throw, Daniel.
János Bánffy runs another academy for youngsters, Buda Juniors. He's a former Hungarian international who played under Puskás when he was the interim manager of Hungary for a 4-game spell in 1993.
He's a huge legend of Hungarian football. Since it's free to talk about him, he's just become all of a sudden Hungarian biggest person. I say this because when I was a young boy, a young footballer, you know, we knew him, but we didn't know much about him because obviously he was in Spain somewhere. And the legend itself is still on. So wherever I go, I mean, travel the world. If I say, oh, I'm coming from Hungary, they say, yeah, Puskás.
Bánffy, like Puskás, also captained the national team and remembers when Hungary, with Puskás as manager, visited Ireland in 1993 for a friendly.
And all of a sudden the crowd just went crazy, you know, like all clapping or screaming, and I said, oh yeah, they like us really a lot here. But then I realized that Ferenc Puskás walked out of the dugout, you know what I mean? He walked on the pitch, he greeted the people, I think he walked to the middle and then he walked to the bench, and till he sit down, the crowd just never stopped. So then it hit me that, okay, that he's really a hero.
I remember when Pelé scored his 1000th goal. I was in Hungary and I was speaking with Puskás for some reason. I think we were at a function, and I said, "Isn't that marvellous, Pelé scoring his 1000th goal? You know, 1,000 goals." And he says, "I scored my 1000th goal about 6 years ago."
The days when Ferenc Puskás and his fellow magnificent Magyars took football by storm are long gone. For too long now, Hungarian football fans have had nothing to cheer at both club and national team level. All they have are the memories provided by Puskás and his teammates.
They wanted to make Hungary more popular all over the world by using a famous actor, Tony Curtis, who originates from Hungary. If Ochi had not been in at the time and had been used instead, we would have been 1,000 times more successful than we were with poor old Tony Curtis when the film was eventually finished.
After retiring in 1966, Puskás embarked on a globe-trotting career in management, taking charge of clubs in Spain, the United States, Paraguay and Australia amongst others, as well as that brief spell in charge of the national team in 1993. The highlight was leading the Greek side Panathinaikos to the European Cup final in 1971. But it's for his performances on the field that he'll be best remembered, and his kindness off it as well.
Puskás always remained a spiritually and friendly person and a good man. And when you lose, a good man is always a great loss.
He went home to Hungary in 1981. The country welcomed him back with open arms. And his funeral summed up just how much he meant to his people.
He was king. He was the best footballer. Everybody paid attention to him, and he paid attention to everybody too.
While I was looking for Di Stefano to get his shirt, I came across Puskás. He said to me, "Well done. I played with your father. You are worthy of him. So I'm going to give you my shirt." From then on, it became the most important shirt I own.
Pancho, as a player and a person, well, I think he was an even better person than he was a player. He was out of this world. Out of this world.
Ferenc Puskás may be gone, but he's far from forgotten. He's a national hero who spearheaded Hungarian football's finest times, the most magnificent of Magyars.